Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to mismapasion, and match day number 2 of the woso Olympics has wrapped up with, as expected, another great round of action for all to see, so let's get right into it all. We start off in Lyon, where off the back of opening day losses, both Colombia and New Zealand took each other on in the pursuit of registering some points on the board. With a great sense of urgency, both teams started off very well, but unsurprisingly, it was Colombia's quality that was shining through the most, with Pavi and Caicedo proving to be unequivocal nuisances for the Ferns' defense, who, to their credit, were measuring up defensively and managing to answer the questions that the opposition was asking. That was up until halfway through the first half, where an inadequately cleared ball saw Restrepo line up a shot on the volley, which made it into the back of the net to give Colombia the lead. And though their chances were fleeting, New Zealand were doing their best to get themselves back into the game, with a few key chances coming their way, but ultimately amounting to nothing. The second half provided the same amount of fare, with Colombia continuing to rain down on New Zealand and chipping away until they finally found their second goal courtesy of Santos, who picked her shot well to all but guarantee her nation the 3 points. There was some concern not too long after the match restarted, as national treasure Catalina Uzme had to be stretchered off after sustaining an injury off camera. Upon initial viewing, it did not seem like it was a knee injury, thankfully, because she was clutching her stomach, but hopefully it's nothing too serious nevertheless. In the end, Colombia ran out, serving 2-0 winners to maintain their hopes of qualifying from the group stages alive, whilst this was the end of New Zealand's Olympic hopes. But they can take solace with the fact that they performed valiantly in this match, with special mention going out to Bot, who was a defensive stalwart in the Ferns' backline, as her clashes with the Colombia attackers, particularly Caicedo, was an epic encounter within this game. The next game that took place saw Japan taking on Brazil, with the former looking to bounce back from their narrow 2-1 loss to Spain on Thursday, whilst Brazil were looking to secure a safe passage for themselves with a win in this game. There was not much to write home about in the first half in terms of goals, but it was definitely not for lack of trying, as both teams were going at it, knowing what was on the line. For the most part, it was Brazil who were continuing to ride the wave of momentum from their previous game as they put Japan to the test time and again, with the latter managing to keep themselves in the game in spite of the opposition's threat. A key moment in the game came towards the end of the first half when Japan were granted a penalty after Rafaela Souza's hand was struck by the ball in a natural position. Thankfully for the NWSL regular, Brazil goalie Lorena saved the admittedly poor attempt from Tanaka to keep the scores tied during the second half. And for the pure entertainment factor, it would thankfully not stay deadlocked for too long, as substitute Jennifer combined well with legend Marta to get the first goal and set Brazil on the path to qualification, but Japan were bent on making them work for it. The Nadeshiko were down but not out as they began to rally and soon found themselves on the dominant end of the spectrum, with Brazil struggling to handle their opponents. Japan's efforts would finally pay dividends in the end, as they would get yet another penalty, which this time was dispatched by Captain Saki Kumagai, but there was more drama to be had towards the end as a new starlet would arrive to announce herself to the world, as 19-year-old Momoko Tanikawa would catch Lorena off her line and volley home from deep to complete the comeback for the former World Cup winners, who would ultimately clinch the match 2-1 to blow their group wide open over a distraught Brazil, who were ultimately outdone in the end. Following this, we saw Spain going up against Nigeria, with the latter looking to bounce back after their narrow loss to Brazil, but it was going to definitely be a tough ask going up against the world champions. To the Super Falcons' credit though, they did put up a superb account of themselves, as this was arguably Spain's toughest match so far, as the Nigerians matched them pound for pound in both attack and defense. Nigeria, at least in my opinion, were the better team in the game overall, but they were ultimately outdone by a sensational free kick by former Ballon d'Or winner Alexia Putellas that caught the opposition completely off guard, which ultimately did prove to be the match winner that made it 2-2 for Spain, which guarantees them a spot in the knockout stages, whilst Nigeria, though down, are not out quite yet, as they still do have a chance of qualifying for the knockouts, but a massive shift against Japan is needed to give them that chance, otherwise they will be going home early. And following this, we had host France taking on compatriots Canada, with both sides vying for a win, but for completely different reasons. A win for France would put the final touches on a knockout berth, whilst Canada needed a win to keep their own hopes of qualifying alive on the back of their 6-point deduction in the wake of Crown Gate that left them on -3 points going into this match. The tension in this game was palpable, and neither team was willing to give an inch to the other unless it was to give each other some licks, as the tackles were flying in this game, and I'm sure both sets of players will be waking up with soreness today. The game finally saw its first goal with none other than Katoto finding the back of the net after some sweet combination play in the build-up to give the host the lead. The goal was earned the hard way, but France had a harder time clamping down on the advancing Canadians, who continued to probe for a leveler. Finally, the current gold medal holders would get their goal after French goalie Pierrot Maignan failed to catch a cross with the ball, kindly falling into the path of Fleming, who struck it into the goal to bring the teams back level. The crescendo would come very late in the game, with Canada on the front foot and France struggling to find a way out of their half of the pitch. The Canucks finally found the goal they needed to get ahead of France, with just luck being on their side, as the waiting feet of Vanessa Gilles did what they needed to do after a deflected strike from the goalie to give Canada the win and blow their group wide open, as a win against their next opponents in Colombia will put them in good stead to continue their Olympic journey. And before we get on to the USA versus Germany, I would like to wish Pierrot Maignan a speedy recovery, as she was treated off with what looked like a facial injury, probably a broken nose, but hopefully it's nothing too severe. The penultimate game we will be reviewing between Germany and the USA was a masterclass in tactical elitism in women's football. For like 25 minutes before history repeated itself, as Germany got rolled over by the time the final whistle blew. Like I said, the first 25 or so minutes of the game were really enthralling, as both teams were highly engaged and were matching each other's moves, and with an early goal from Sophia Smith just adding more to the drama that was slowly unraveling itself before the watching audience, both in the stadium and at home. Despite being one up, the US were not on the front foot, as Germany were holding their own and soon enough drew themselves level after an awesome strike by Gwyn outside the box to promise an intense encounter that looked to exhibit that whatever the USA could do, Germany could do just as well. But then that promise was quickly broken in less than 2 minutes, as Mallory Swanson pounced on a deflected shot from Smith to put the Stars and Stripes right back in the lead. And despite their futile attempts to try and get themselves back into it, Germany just could not effectively break down the US defense, with the best moment coming from Lea Schuler, who was one-on-one with the keeper, but Alyssa Nair managed to quell the danger to make sure Germany stayed on one goal. Emma Hayes' charges would eventually put the game to bed, with Sophia Smith finally getting her brace and Williams coming off the bench to score a great goal that beat the keeper and nestled it into the far post. With their second win of the tournament, the USA have punched their ticket into the knockout rounds of the Olympics, whilst Germany are still in contention themselves but can't afford to leave anything to chance, and will have to decimate their final group stage opponents, who we will now cover in the final match for this video. Now, if you watched this match or saw the flurry of tweets that were talking about it, 90% of which were just me going crazy at the absurd spectacle of it all, then you'll know that Australia versus Zambia was an absolute mazza. 11 goals, 1 hat-trick, a pair of braces, all held up by some of the most shocking and downright amateur defending and goalkeeping you will ever see for a while. And to be honest, it was really great to watch. This game was a free-for-all, and unfortunately I don't have the sufficient lexicon to describe just how insane it was watching this live. Before it had started, I don't think anyone expected much out of it, and even I was going to pass on it, because in my mind I had said that Australia would be looking to bounce back with some easy competition in Zambia, and whilst the Aussies did eventually go on to win the game, they really took the most challenging road to get there. It took less than a minute for things to start popping off, as the sleepy Matilda's defense was caught lacking by Barbara Banda, who got the first goal of the game, but it would not be too long before the Tillies pulled one back to level the score. Unfortunately for them though, but thankfully for us the viewers, NWSL baller Rachel Kundananji put the Copper Queens back in before Banda stepped up again to give the Southern African nation a comfortable cushion, which was soon ripped apart by Hayley Raso, who headed home in less than 2 minutes after Banda's goal to reduce the deficit back to 1. And with the first half coming to an entertaining close, Australia looked to be slowly getting themselves back together until Banda decided to rewind the clock and once more sealed an Olympic hat-trick for herself to restore the 2-goal lead once more, with the score at halftime being 4-2 in favor of Zambia. Going into the second half, you'd think that there was no halftime team talk by the respective coaches for the players to either wake up or to stop the silliness at the back, because the goals just kept coming, as Kundanaji could register her first brace of the tournament to put the Zambians ahead by 3, and at this point they just had to remain calm to see out the game, but something must have been in the air as a howler by Zambian goalie Musole quickly saw the deficit reduced back down to 2 goals. And at this point, it was 5-3, and just about halfway into the second half, and if you're Zambia, surely you're telling yourself that it's better to just sit back and try hanging there by any means necessary, in spite of the fact that your defense is more porous than a sponge, right? Well, wrong. Because here, Australia came back swinging with gusto as Arsenal's Steph Catley would step up to the plate not once, but twice, to draw the scores level with their second goal coming from the spot, with the remontada being finally accomplished by super sub Heyman, who scored the 11th goal of the game to send Zambia down under and crashing out of the Olympics as a result of this. The full-time scenes were as dramatic as you could ever imagine. Tears of joy, relief, pain and sadness were shed, and that was just in the stands. Players were on the floor and everyone was entertained. Again, I haven't done this match any justice in my description or observations, which were mainly that both teams were just inexcusably poor at the back. But if you have even just a few minutes to watch the highlights and not the full match, then I really implore you to go out of your way and watch it, because just like the countries' names being combined, this match was awesome. And those are all the games that took place in the second round of the group stages of the WOSO Olympics. What do you think was the match of the round? Mine by default was of course Australia versus Zambia, but let me know what you thought of the games, who stood out for you the most, and who you think will claim a spot in the knockouts. But until then, thank you all very much as ever for watching. If you missed the first round of action or the news about Canada and DroneGate, then I've made videos on those that should be on your screen just about now, if not already, and you can watch those too. But until then, I will see you in the next one.